Sister Kathleen Donnelly. This is certainly a privilege for me to be interviewing you today, because I remember the first day you got here on campus, and fortunately you were living on the 4th floor of Regina.
Right.
Yes. And did you live with a 2-bedroom apartment?
Pardon me?
Were you in a 2-bedroom apartment?
I was, yes.
Yes.
It was a lovely apartment. And yes, we had 2 bedrooms, a large living room, and a full kitchen. If you can imagine me in a kitchen, I've always been Stouffer's best customer. Yes.
Kathleen, I understand that you spent most of your life, and today you're how old, may I ask?
How old am I today? Well, they tell me that I'm 94, but I say I'm in my 95th year.
Yes, yes.
So that's October the 7th.
And
I'll be 95.
And
Yes.
some 88 of those years
Yes,
have been in Florida.
yes, yes.
So after 88 years in Florida, coming to the cornfields of Adrian, Michigan, I bet that was a challenge.
It was very different, to say the least, but it reminded me of an incident that happened when I was in Pensacola. We, as you well know, in those days, we traveled in 2s. But when there are only 6 in the convent and in school, you don't have a partner to travel with you to meetings. So I figured that the most intelligent thing to do would be get a substitute, put her in my classroom. I was the principal. Classroom with 7th and 8th graders, and the lady was subbing for me. I got in the car, said a prayer, and headed for Mobile, Alabama. Because even though we were located in Florida, we were in the Diocese of Alabama. Now, you figure that out. That happened before I arrived. So I'm rolling along on the way to Mobile, no interstate highway. I'm driving through, you wouldn't believe, a cornfield. Was that providential? Yes. But somebody was trying to tell me something. Yes. I wonder where the angel was, but the angel just happened to be in the middle of the cornfield, because all of a sudden my back tire blew, and I knew that I had not passed any residents or gas stations. So I thought, well, I guess I have to walk forward, always forward. All right. And all of a sudden, out of the cornfield comes this gorgeous big baritone voice saying, "What's an Adrian Dominican doing walking down the highway in Alabama?" And I thought, oh, he caught up with me. Here I am alone. So out of the cornfield stepped this large-built, handsome gentleman, and I said, "How did you know I was an Adrian Dominican?" And he said, "Because I was a Chicago cop." Oh. Could you believe that? Oh. He had retired from being a policeman and was in the cornfield. Oh. Now, I don't care what anyone says. I think he was put there. Exactly. If he wasn't St. Joseph, then he had to be my guardian angel. Oh. So I got the tire changed quickly, and he said, "On your way, be safe." Oh, what a story. Wasn't that lovely? So I went from cornfield to the cornfield. Right.
And did you have our sisters in, you were born in West Palm Beach, correct?
Yes, and that was the only parish, Catholic parish in West Palm at that time. And St. Anne's, which was the parish, was the only Catholic school other than our academy, which was Rosarian. And we were only maybe 4 blocks apart. And that's where I went to school.
And who was your principal?
Well, at that time we had a number of ones, but the last one I had was Sister Ricarda. Yes,
Sister
Ricarda.
Ricarda.
Yes. And they wondered why how did I get to Adrian?
Yes.
And I said, by way of a Chicago cop, but that wasn't the full truth, but he got me here safely.
Yes.
But what had happened was Sister met me in the hall one day and said, well, how are things going? And I said, well, everything's fine except I can't learn that Latin, and I'm pretty discouraged about things. So she said, well, I think you would look better on the other side of the desk. And I thought, well, I don't know what she really means by that. But she said, Mother Gerald is in Miami right now, and she's on visitation. That means she's visiting the sisters in Miami, but she has no one to go with her back to Adrian, and she's going on Thursday. So don't you think you would like to go with her? And I said, well, why? I don't know. And she said, well, you could finish your high school there, but let me speak to your mother. And Mother happened to be in school that day because she had started a lunch program. Right. So Sister Ricarda went to Mother. I don't know what their conversation was. Neither told me. Like mothers and principals, they keep everything a secret. So I never heard from Sister Ricarda, but she had spoken to Mother, gave Mother a list. And when Mother got home, she went down to a store and bought a lot of black material. And she had been given a pattern for the postulant's outfit.
So your mother?
To my mother. And so that was to be, not only just the the dress for the postulant, but also a list included a trunk, a suitcase, a set of dishes, a silverware, and whatever. So that I didn't know that you took all of that to high school. This was the beginning of my 10th grade. And in those days, we started school later because of the heat and no air conditioning. So in other words, I was a full 9th grader and maybe 2 months 10th grade. And that was my education. So obviously I had a lot to catch up on. So
you thought you were going to accompany Mother Gerald to Adrian to finish high school.
Right. But during my high school, I would be a postulant. Well, whatever that meant to me, I accepted her word. And the excitement of coming to Adrian was my first train ride. Can you imagine? Somebody from Florida, from West Palm Beach, that was the excitement of it all.
So did you dress as a postulant?
I was
trained
in the parlor at Rosarian. Mother Gerald gave me the postulant's veil. Now, how did Mother Gerald have a postulant's veil? That wasn't one of the things on my mother's list. So what had happened was, they tell me, that when Mother was in the car leaving Adrian to go to Miami, she said to Sister Mary Phillip, bring me a postulant's veil, cuffs, remember those stiff cuffs we wore, a collar for the cape and so on. And Sister Mary Phillip said to Mother Gerald, but we do not have an application. And I was told that Mother Gerald told Mary Philip to do what she was told to do. So whoever was coming hadn't applied at all, and that was true. I mean, I was always going to be a nurse like my mother, you know. So I had not applied. There was no record here, and I will assume you can go to my records and you won't find an application because I never applied to enter the Adrian Dominicans.
Someone just picked you up and you floated here.
Yeah. Well, it was either St. Joseph or my guardian angel had to be, you know. So
once you arrived here, what was the welcome like?
Well, coming up Siena Heights Drive were two nuns walking, and Mother told the gentleman who was driving us, he had picked us at the railroad station, and he was told to stop and take the nuns with us up here to the Mother house. And in those days, the custom was when Mother was out of town for any time, the nuns would all line up in the entrance there to greet her as she came. And as we started up the driveway, Mother turned around and said to me in her Irish brogue, "Kathleen, get on the floor." And these two nuns looked at me, and I looked at them. They wondered, what is this we picked up? And I wondered, where is this I'm going, you know, on the floor. So I was obedient, see, right from the beginning, because the train ride had taught me that. You do what Mother says. And I got on the floor, and the nuns all are at the car to greet Mother, and Mary Philip immediately says to Mother, that was her mistake. Bad news for me. But anyway, she said to Mary Philip, "And where is your postulant from Florida?" And Mother turned to the car and said, "Kathleen, get out of the car," which I obediently did. Well,
Dressed as a postulant.
Dressed as a postulant, you know. And that was my downfall.
Your downfall with Mary Philip.
With Mary Philip, that's right.
Director.
That's right. So, and people immediately, mistakenly, were calling me Mother Gerald's postulant, you know.
Well, you were.
And I was, because everyone down home was just as surprised as everyone up here was. So, but they didn't know the connections, you know. So, did I ever think about becoming a sister? No, because I was going to be a nurse like my mother, you know. And so what happened was the high school students were allowed at lunchtime to go out in the parkway right at the end of the school.
This is in Florida.
This was at West Palm, yes, at St. Anne's. And what the girls were all talking about was boys, and that was okay, but my main interest in a boy was how far could he hit a ball. My father was a pro baseball player, so my entire life growing up was involved in sports. So instead of sitting out there and finding who did what with whom, I thought it's cooler in church. And I just would walk the few paces into church. And the family was always deeply involved in saying the rosary and propagating the rosary. And so I always had carried the rosary. So at noon, I would go to church, and I would be nice and cool, and for some reason comfortable, and I would just sit there and say the rosary at noon. I don't know that any of the nuns ever saw that. They didn't ask me. And I didn't tell them because then they would chastise me for not being where I belonged with my class.
Sister Kathleen, what I so admire about you is your dedication to education, because never did you stop educating. You're still educating people. I saw you talking to Dayton out in the hallway. But educator par excellence. And somewhere along the line, you must have received some recognition for that.
Well, maybe with Sister Ricarda, I don't know. But my entire wonderful education was at Berry University. And my bachelor's and master's are both in administration and supervision. And I never had another mission other than education. And that's what I wanted to excel in then.
Yes. I imagine you were a wonderful principal.
I tried to be, because I wanted to treat people the way I would have wanted to be treated, And I was fortunate before entering that all the wonderful Dominican sisters who were the principals at St. Anne's were just marvelous, wonderful, happy people, prayerful people, and maybe subconsciously that's what I wanted to be. But again, Mother was always there,
Is there some school in Florida where you left your heart?
Oh, yes. In Miami. Oh, yeah.
Where, at St. Patrick's?
Here I go. And when I'm happy, I cry.
Oh.
There are two kinds of Irishmen, those who cry about everything and those who don't. Well, I'm a crier. Yes. St. Hugh is in Coconut Grove in Miami. And I retired there after 34 years.
Oh, Kathleen.
The Spanish people are my heart. Yeah.
Oh, how beautiful.
They're lovely. Anything that was needed, they gave with no questions asked,
And
So-
you gave 101% yourself.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
In
God
fact,
bless
I always use the number 110.
you.
Because I think most people should act toward 101, So I wanted to just push it a little more.
110%.
110%.
Yeah.
But I really retired because I had been told I had to have my hip replaced. And that was the thing that after 34 years, I told Father I had to go. I had no inclination toward retiring, but that was obviously just, it happened because it had a purpose for me to get here again to the cornfield.
Yeah. Do you still have family in Florida?
Oh, yes. I have one sister. Both parents are deceased, obviously. At my age, they would be deceased,
Yeah.
So my one sister, who is 7 years younger than I, Pat, she is in Lake Worth, Florida. When I was here in the novitiate, Mother and Dad moved from West Palm Beach, where I'd been born, to Lake Worth, a small city just south of West Palm.
Did you have a brother?
I never had a brother. I was told by some relatives who came from Michigan to visit us that Mother had had 2 boys before I was born. And I do remember one day that when I was going to school, when I left, Mother was in bed with a little baby in her arms. And when I came home from school, the baby wasn't there. It had been a boy. And again, mothers in those days didn't talk about their personal selves, So I never knew what happened to any of the boys or if my relatives' numbers were correct, So it just wasn't talked about, And then Pat was, well, let's see, I said 7 years, all right, younger than I. Then the next is Betty Jane, and she was 10 years younger than I, and the mother of 10 boys and 3 girls. And Dad would have loved that, wouldn't
Yes,
he?
yes,
10 boys.
yes.
He would have had his own baseball
I
team. You know. Instead, I was a substitute.
Yes.
You know.
Well, you followed through on that in your own life, didn't you? Of teaching,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
being a coach, I think.
Yes. In Jacksonville, we didn't have a coach. We were the poor parish on the west side of the river, and our other school was the rich school on the Atlantic side of the river, and Sister John Norton, who was the principal and the 8th grade teacher, said that she understood my father was a pro baseball player, and I said yes, he had been, and when he could no longer get down and up like the catchers have to do, his knees gave way. Well, then he became an American League umpire. Oh. And so my whole life was sports, primarily baseball. Mother called herself summer widow, because Dad was never home in the summer. So, and in the winter, he was on the police force in Palm Beach. Yeah.
Did your parents ever have the opportunity of meeting Mother Gerald?
Yes.
Other than the time of
when
your
they
entrance?
said goodbye to me. Yeah. It was interesting in that, too. They had to go look for Dad. He had hidden down by the lake. Yeah, so,
He didn't want to lose his little girl.
Yes. On the day I was received, Mother, Dad, and my 2 sisters came. And at that time, Betty Jane was in 1st grade, and Pat was in 4th grade, you know. And they all were sitting with me except Dad. And I looked across the lobby in Madden, and there was my handsome father talking with Mother Gerald. And I can remember they were at the spot of the staircase coming down, and they were standing there. And finally, Dad looked at his watch, and he said, I have to go now. He was umpiring the World Series in Detroit.
Oh, my.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So that's where he left. And when it got time for our names, I hadn't thought of anything but my mother's name, but it was the same as mine, so I couldn't have that. And so I took my sisters and made a combination of names from their names. And the night that before, when we got the habit, we were lined up, and I was the second youngest in the novitiate, and Diane Miller was the youngest. And as Mary Phillip went along giving out the names, when she got to where I was, she said, Charles Mary. And I turned to Diane and I said, is that your name? Of course, you know, I wasn't too popular with Sister Mary Phillip. And
Because you were Mother's postulant.
yeah. And so she said, no, that's your name. And I said, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't ask for that. Number what mistake for Kathleen, huh? And so she said to me, if you don't like the name, you go over and complain to Mother Gerald. She gave you the name. Well, you know where she got that. Yeah. She liked my Irish father, you know. And so she gave me his name. And I never did really like it, because to me it was backwards. We had a Mary Charles, a Marie Charles, and somebody else Charles. So it ended with me being Charles Mary. So the day we could go back to our baptismal name, I ran the hall for the the information to what I wanted to be called, yeah,
that's
which was my mother's name.
Now, I know, as I recall, you you were first stationed here in the Midwest, but that
Yes.
didn't last long. Why is
No,
that?
I was 4 years in Chicago, and every winter, playground duty, you know, the cold weather and my health didn't agree. Twice I landed in Little Company of Mary with pneumonia. Why I was then changed to Detroit, I'll never know, because that really wasn't better. I was there 1 year, and the doctor wrote to Mother Gerald and said, the weather here, she can't live through this kind of winter and be out there in the cold. And so Mother immediately sent me back to St. Patrick's on Miami Beach. And I taught there for 8 years. Wasn't that lovely?
Wonderful.
That was grand.
I just imagine all of the grown adults now. I mean, the men and women that crossed your path during your many years as a teacher in Florida, as well as a principal, and how blessed they were by your presence and your skills. Would you please share with me what words of wisdom you have for those who might be following us into this community?
Well, first of all, if I was speaking with the parents, I would remind them that the child must know that he or she is loved. They can't just say it because, words are too easy sometimes to come by. And they have to be shown that they're loved. And the Spanish have a beautiful custom. I hope they never let it go. They kiss the child goodnight. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah. And for the children, if your mother ever says no, what she is saying is no to that, but I love you.
Yes, beautiful.
And know that your mother loves you if she can say no, even though you beg and cry. The no just envelops you in, I love you.
And that word love is yours in your heart because of all the love you have received through your life.
Oh, yes.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Well, thank
God
you.
bless you.
Loving somebody who's just naturally good is so easy, It's so simple to say thank you or you're welcome. Makes you feel good, too. Yeah.
And I love you.
And I love you. Sure.